Hi, I'm Corey Wade, and I'm going to give you an overview of coding Python and Colab notebooks. This is an interactive lesson in which we are going to code together. So what I want you to do right now is open up a web browser, preferably Google Chrome after logging into your Gmail account. I would recommend that you go ahead and pause the video and do that. So, and the reason why is because Google will store your notebook in your Google Drive. Okay. So what I want you to do is go to a web browser and type in colab.research.google.com. I do provide the links in the videos. However, I want to show you how to obtain them on your own. So again, type in colab.research.google.com. You should see a page similar to this one. By the way, Colab is C-O-L-A-B. Now, if you're at a page like this, you should see a new notebook option in blue. Go ahead and click on that now. Otherwise, if you click behind, you should see something like this. And then you can just go to File, New Notebook. So go ahead and open up a new notebook now. Now, when you do that, you are entering a coding environment, okay? This is a place where you can run and execute different kinds of code, and Python is one of the languages that you can, in fact, run. Let's make my screen a little larger so you can see it better. There's a blank title at the top. This is the name of your notebook. You want to leave the .ipynb, which stands for IPython notebook, and go ahead and change this. I have 79 untitled notebooks. You know, you could call it Intro to Python, maybe. All right. And if you go down now to this area where this is called a cell, C-E-L-L, where the cursor is, and this is where you can run and execute Python code. Okay, so let us all run a line of Python code together. Now, what code does really, you could think about it in terms of input and output. We input something and there's going to be some kind of an output. And a coding language has its own ways of, putting, say, syntax together to create desired outputs. So something that's very standard to do in programming is simply to display text, right? If you want something to show up on a computer, you have to have a way to communicate with the programming language. And in Python, this is using the print function. So type in print, must be lowercase, P-R-I-N-T, and then put an open parentheses. Now, notice that two things happen. Number one, the word print changes color, indicating that it is a keyword in Python. Pretty cool. And number two, you get a closed parentheses with it. I didn't put that in. It came in automatically, as it should for you. This is nice because every open parentheses requires a closed parentheses. Now, inside of the parentheses, you put the text that you want to display inside of quotation marks. So go ahead and put in a single quotation mark. Okay, you may also use double quotes if you prefer. It is the same in Python. So I'm going to put a single quotation mark, do that now. And then you can see it, you get a closed single quotation mark. Again, really cool. So I can say whatever I want inside of that. You can say whatever you want. I will say what the focus of this particular class is going to be, which is on, well, let's just do what's standard. It's hello world. This is like, it's just a tradition in programming. It's what you're supposed to write if you've never written any code before. There's a long-standing tradition of this in different languages. Now, when you do this, okay, this is executable Python code. Okay, if you have it exactly like this. And again, inside the quotes, anything, doesn't matter. And now we can run it. Okay, so you see the play button and you could press it, but I don't want you to. And the reason why is because when you're taking class with me, we're going to be using a lot of Colab notebooks. You're going to be running a lot of code, so I want you to press Shift-Enter. Okay, it's just a faster technique. So what you can do, you can like hold down on the Shift key and then press Return. Go ahead and do that now. So holding the Shift key, press Return. And you can see that the play button is starting to churn up. And there's the output hello world. Now, if you've never programmed before, this does not seem amazing, but it actually is. Because even though you're in a coding environment, this is actually real code between you and the machine. Like you're just using an interface. You could get out the terminal and run this and it'll display it to you. So this is fundamental programming language. It's also very elegant in Python. This is 5 lines of code in another language. Python, as you will find out, is a very user-friendly language. Now, we're going to be doing a lot of different Python. And one thing with Colab notebooks that's kind of unique is that you can actually organize your notebooks with what are called text cells. You see this plus code and plus text. So go ahead and hit plus text, okay? And what we're going to do now is we're going to put in titles for this. So now I'm showing you a little bit about how these notebooks work. So for a title, let's think of it as like a header, okay? So this notebook, these are standard in data science, by the way. They include text and output like between the code, you could say. So if you put a hashtag in and then the title, let's just say print function, okay? When I write that on the left side, go ahead and do it, you see what it's like in the, this is not code here, okay? This is just a Colab interface to organize the notebooks. And you see what it will look like on the right side, okay? See, if I take out this header, then it's small, it looks normal. Okay, so if I put in the header and I press Shift Enter, you can see it runs the header. It's got an arrow on it as well. So now, if you click in the text cell, go ahead and do that, then you will see these arrows here, okay? So go ahead and move it up to the top, right? And the way this works is that if you have a lot of stuff on here, these arrows will, it's just a quick way to navigate through the notebook, so it's kind of cool. So what you have learned already, just a few minutes in here, several things. Number 1, how to open a Colab notebook, okay? Number 2, how to display text in Python, which is actually a very useful, widely used function. And 3, how to, you could say, put headers into Colab notebooks. And one other thing is if you stay clicked on the print function, you do another plus for text cell, you could say whatever you want after that. For instance, I might say, you don't have to put this in, but you could. The following code shows how to display text in Python. Okay, so that's like a little note for me to help me like understand what is in the notebook. Now, for those of you who have had, and again, press Shift in order to run it, who have a different coding, this might seem strange to you, different coding environments, but I'm letting you know that notebooks are normal in data science because there's a lot of output and how it's interpreted matters, as those of us who are studying statistics can vouch for. Okay, so this is the print function. Let's do some other stuff with Python. Although I always like to just do something else so it's clear. I mean, you can print out anything you want. Print out your own piece. Print out something else. I will write Berkeley Coding Academy rocks. Berkeley Coding Academy is my organization to teach data science to teens from all over. And it's connected to this YouTube channel. Okay, so if I press Shift Enter, right, that's what it's going to display. You know, however you put in parentheses, exactly as you put it. Great. Okay, let us move on. What I want you to do next is add in another text cell, and let's do a one of my favorite topics. Let's just take a quick look at Python as a calculator. Okay, and this is just fun. It's kind of simple and fun for me, I guess, if you like math. Okay, so I want you to do it without me. Add 2 and 5. Just do it. You might say, well, hey, I don't know how to code. You know, just show me the syntax for that. I don't know what to put. Well, try something. Just add 2 and 5, right? If I gave you a calculator you'd never use, I bet you could do it. Try it here. Go ahead and do it. Press Shift Enter. It makes sense. I mean, like for me, I mean, you would try 2 plus 5, just like that. That's how the standard operations are the same in Python. Okay, so you could do 2 minus 5, minus and negative are the same. Certainly 2 times 5. Okay. Stars is a standard multiplier in programming. The asterisk. You could do 2 divided by 5. Now this is going to be interesting because different coding languages give you different outputs here, but Python gives you the desired mathematical accurate output of 0.4. And how about 2 to the 5th power? So I'm going to, so everything we just did, I ran all these math operations, is Python code. It's code in a lot of languages, right? Standard mathematical operations. But when you exponentiate, there isn't a universal symbol. So, and I do want to show you something else. These text, like cells like this one up here, and the print function even, are designed to organize the notebook. When you're directly commenting on code, that's something different, and you can do what's called a comment. Okay, so a comment is a hashtag inside a coding cell, okay? This is fundamental. So when I'm in this block, I'm in the coding cell. If I add a text cell, that is not a coding area, okay? That's something different. It's like up here, right, in the title. That's not code. You got to be in the cell to run code. So if you're in the cell, you press the hashtag, and I can say 2 to the 5th power, which is what I'm going to show you how to code. It's beautifully elegant in Python. You take the 2, exponentiate it to the 5. So I sometimes ask my students, does this make sense? Like, does 2 star 5 make sense for exponentiation? And it does, because it's repeated multiplication. I think it's beautiful and it should be universal. So if you press Shift Enter with that, you get 32, which is the expected output, because that's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 32. Okay. So pretty cool. So that's basic math in Python. I'm not going to get into the complicated math in this lecture. Okay, I'm going to show you some other things in Python. When I say complicated, I mean you have to invoke libraries to do kind of cooler things, like to get like the number pi. You could certainly put in 3.14159, but to get the like actual value. It's just painful for me to like say it and not do it. So you know what? Let me just quickly show you. Okay, so here's an advanced little topic for those of you who are interested. So how would you display the number pi? Well, it's not in like the regular setup. Okay, so what you need to do is you would first import numpy. Okay, import numpy as in p. Just type it in. Okay, I can talk more about that later because we will be doing imports when we do data science. Okay, and the idea is this: Python separates out into separate libraries, so you're not overloaded. So if you're going to use a specialized library, NumPy stands for numerical Python, then you import it separately. Okay, and here's the advantage. What it allows you to do when you do np, which is how I stored the library. Okay, so I press np, it accesses the whole library, and then when I press the dot, I can actually get anything in it. Okay, dot it's it is like everything that lives in the NumPy library you can access after the dot. So pi is in there, I can tell you. And if you press Shift Enter, okay, it does give you the value for pi. And look, if I come up here and add another coding cell, if I do np.now, because it's been stored already, and I press the dot, you see like tons of options. I'll just show you one more if you wanted like the log. Yeah, for instance, that's how you do it, right? You can't write log, you've got to do np log because it's in the log library. You can kind of do all the math in the NumPy library. So like, what's the log of 10? Is it 1 or is it like 2 point something, because does it use base 2.7? Well, let's find out. It uses the mathematical 2.7. That's E 2.71828, etc. Okay, so that's a little bit of advanced stuff for you if you're a beginner. What else do you do with Python? Well, there's a lot. So let me show you a couple more things. I'm going to do a new text header. And again, you should be coding along with me because that's how you're going to learn. And if you ever get stuck, this notebook, completed notebook, will be available to you as well in the links below. So you can always check it out to follow along. I want to show you like, let's just do a topic there called lists. These are arrays in other languages. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. By the way, they do have these little trash bins you can use to get rid of something. Usually when you press Shift Enter, it just gives you a coding cell underneath without that, which is nice. Okay, so what's a list in Python? Well, let's say I have like a list called primes. So here's the idea. Well, first let me just put it in. You use bracket notation, and so that's syntax for a list. Okay, so when I put, say, prime numbers in there, you separate them with commas. So 2, 3, 5, 7. I can put as many as I want, 11. Okay. But now, here's the thing. Usually when you're programming, like that is a list, but maybe I want to do something with it and refer to it later. So typically you store what you use in programming as variables. Okay. Like in math, we say x equals 3. X could be this list. Okay, it could be a list of numbers, right? Well, in programming, you don't usually use x and y because, what can I say? You tend to use words that actually are what it is. So if it's prime numbers, I could call it, for instance, primes. And what you do, you put the variable first, and then you put an equal sign, and then you put the list of elements after it. Okay? So what I've done here, I put a comment in. Assign the primes 2 through 11 to the variable primes. And I say, yeah, I won't repeat primes. I'll say prime numbers. All right. So again, what's the advantage of that? There's a lot. You can do a lot with that. Okay, let me show you. If I press Shift Enter, okay, I run that coding cell. See, the primes have been stored. Now, you got to do it just like this. You could end up with an error, right? Some of you may have already be getting errors. Don't, if you get an error, it's okay, right? Like, let's see. If I forget a comma, will it work? I'm going to run the code and find out. It doesn't work. See, it says invalid syntax. And if you see invalid syntax, it's because you're missing something typically. So if I can see here, like it's pointing here, but I can see that I'm missing a comma. If you didn't have a bracket at the end, it's not going to work. You need the closing bracket. And sometimes, like when I get the errors, like I worry less about the errors and more about how do I, fix it. Like I look at it first instead of like reading it, like unexpected EOF. I honestly don't know what that means. And the other thing you may wonder about spacing, your spacing can be different. So you could have no space there, press Shift Enter. That's okay. You could have more spaces if you want. Oh, brother, you don't want that period there. That's like oh man, that's a bad change. That's like what happens, in the phones. They shouldn't be doing that. Someone told me Colab was, what can I say? Oh, I won't say anything. I think Colab needs maybe some different directions. But anyway, I'll put things in the comments below if it's important. Okay, in regard to accessing Colab and using it. Also in here, it doesn't matter. If I don't put a space there, will it still work? It's actually okay. So in Python, spacing is okay, but syntax has to be exact. So between two numbers has to be a comma, but you could have multiple spaces. It's a little awkward to do it like that. I try to be consistent and to give it one space. Okay, so after it's been stored, you can print out. Remember how you can put anything in? Well, I was saying quotes, but you could print out a variable too. Like you can print out a list of something. Like, can I print out the primes? Okay. So note that like when I'm trying to do this, see, because this is not in quotes, it's not going to show primes. This is a variable here. And what Python does is it looks for it. It says, hey, this isn't a quote. That means it must be defined somewhere else. And so it says, here's the name, primes, and it goes to look for it, and it'll find, oh, here's primes. It's a list of these numbers. So I press Shift Enter to run it. You can see it displays the list. Okay. By the way, in case you're, let me just show you something else. If I just write primes and I press Shift Enter, it also displays the list. Okay. Print is more common, I can tell you, because it can be in the middle of a program and it'll show it, but this will only work at the very end. I'll put in what these are so that you're aware. So this is display. You could just say display variable primes because, you know, it could be later in the program and maybe you don't know what it is. Another way to show variable primes. Okay, so sorry for the background noise. I believe that is my dishwasher going on. You can also do things like print. We already did the print. Sorry, I got distracted by the dishwasher. My apologies there. There's a lot that you can do with the variables. Okay, what I wanted to show you is that you can reassign it. And we don't do this in math a lot. X is 3, it's 3. But, you know, I could change it. I could change it to 2, 3, and 5. Okay, and then that's what it's going to be defined as, because I can just write primes next to show you. Like, it doesn't, like, check, oh, no, there are 2 primes. I don't know which one to pick. Coding is top to bottom, okay? It's going to reveal what the most recent one. So there's 2, 3, 5. Now to add members to a list, I'll just show you one little thing. Or elements. You call them members or elements. So basically there's syntax for everything. And we're not going to go over everything in coding here. There's simply too much. I'm going to do a little overview of some different highlights. For those of you, we're going to learn how to code everything we need to know going forward in the individual lessons for this class. So I will say primes, dot append, okay? See, once I do the dot, these are all the options of what you can do with a list, okay? Because it runs primes dot, it knows, oh, that's a list. So in Python, here are my options for a list. And append is actually the name to add an element. So I could append 7. Okay, I don't put it in quotes. You could put in quotes, but that's a little different. For numbers, you typically just want to represent them as they are. And now if I check primes, okay, you can see it's got the number 7 added to it. Okay, so that's a little bit on lists for you. We'll be using lists of numbers. And let's do a new topic. And for this topic, let's just say, let's just call it loops. It's a fun topic. Okay, so here's the question. Can we print out first 100 numbers? Okay, let's go big. Now, you don't want to do print 1, print 2, print 3, etc. You could, right? If you thought of that, that's great. But in coding, basically, there are always ways to do things to shortcut things, right? So repetition of like code like that is called a loop. And let me just show you how to do it. So write the keyword for, F-O-R, you see it changes color. And then we're going to do something that's called a dummy variable, which is I. So you could actually call that anything, okay? You could even, maybe we should call it number. I is actually standard, but my point here is you could call it whatever you want. Okay, it's a variable that we're going to use later. And then we put in the keyword in, okay? And then you put in range, okay? And what range does is it assigns a range of values. And you can say if you can start at 1 and end at 100. Although I think that does not include 100. The standard way to do it is just range 100. And then what this does, what this code does, is the range includes all numbers 0 through 99, and it's going to give the variable number assigned to each of them, right? So what you can do, you press enter a colon, okay, 2 dots, press return. Now, when you press return in Python, you end up shifted, okay? This is shifted to the right, and that's how it's supposed to be. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Then put in print. So and the parentheses, what are we printing out? Okay, we're trying to print out the first 100 numbers. And I just told you that what this line above it does is it loops through each number and assigns them all to the variable number. Well, you print out the numbers. Okay, but see, this is a loop. It doesn't print out one number. What it does, it starts here and it goes, and then it gets to the range, and it says, you know what? We're starting at 0. And it says that needs the variable number. And it goes here to the next line, it prints out 0. But in a loop, you go back, and that's why it's called a loop. And you do it again, and you print out 1. You loop there again and print out 2, and it goes all the way until it stops at 100. Okay? So now, if I press Shift Enter, you can see it shows the first 100 numbers. You know, the output in Colab is maybe jumped around, but they're all there. Right? It starts with 0, and you can see if you scroll all the way down, it stops at 99. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Like that's a loop. Okay, and that's a standard thing to do with loops. You could do whatever you want to. Like, let me just show you another example. Let's say we want to do something like this. Print out first 10 cubes. Oh, that's so fun. So how do we do that? Well, you do for, I'm not going to use number again. I'll just say for I, again, which is normal, like an iterator. For I in range 10. Okay, so now the variable is called I, not number. Put the colon there, press return. And then I don't just want to print out I. Okay, right? Because that would just give me the number 0 through 10. I want I to the 3rd power. So if you remember, that is the double parentheses with a 3. Okay? And that's going to show us the first 10 cubes. By the way, this spacing is actually unique to Python. So in most coding languages, they use brackets. You can see this already has parentheses. And you know, with like brackets inside of brackets inside of brackets. In Python, you end up with indentation. And again, if you've done coding before, you may think it's weird and even be like skeptical. But my experience, and a lot of people use it, is that Python is actually much nicer like that, because when you have a bunch of indent in code, you know it belongs together. And with brackets inside of brackets, that can be harder to tell. Furthermore, contrary to what you may think, you don't typically end up with a lot of code like, oh, crazy like indentations. You usually only end up with like 1 or 2 or maybe 3. Okay, so if I run that, look at that. This is beautiful. You see the power of this stuff, right? I mean, you print out the first 100 cubes like that, you know? So I will tell you this, true confession, I do my taxes using Python because I store the variables, which is really nice. And it just makes for a better user experience for me too, because I don't know, it's just a clean way of doing it. Okay. Wow, look how quickly the cubes go up. So that was several different pieces of Python. There's a little on loops, a little on using Python as a calculator, and lists. And by the way, there are other data types, which we'll get to at another time. Data type, like a list is one data type, but there are others. They're like dictionaries. I don't want to do that now, but I want to show you one last big piece that we'll be using in its functions. Okay. So if I do a new text cell here, I'm going to label it functions, code with me. Now, I'm going to show you in text how we do it in math class, right? Let's say, so something like this. The following function in math takes a number as input and has 5 times the number as output. Right? Multiply the function times 5. So in math, we would say f x equals 5x, right? That's exactly how you write it. You know, this is targeting my math students, and like, you know, I know when you're in high school, like, you know that function, right? You know what that means. And if I said, hey, I want you to put in 3 for the function, you would write f of 3, and then you might say, well, that equals 5 times 3 times could be dot, it could be the time symbol, it could be like that. And you say, well, that equals 15, right? So let's look at how to do this in Python, okay? Right, when I'm doing the text cell, that's not Python, okay? The coding cell, now I'm entering Python. But it doesn't look right, by the way. You have to do an extra return. All right. So it's different syntax. You put that in, it's not going to work. You could try, right? You could try it. It doesn't work. Okay. I'm showing you like the right stuff to put in, you know. It's when you, anyway, how do we do it? So you write DEF. I'm just going to run so the error is not there. DEF is, so let's write Python function to multiply a number by 5. Okay. Functions, by the way, is really where you get into the power of coding. So you write DEF first. Again, that's the keyword for defining a function. Now, as you're starting to gather, you can name things whatever you want. I'm going to call this not times 5, but quintuple, because that's like what it is. There's a one word for you, quintuple. Oh, sorry, I should come back to that. I mean, whatever, I already put it in. You could call it F, okay, but I guess technically, you know what, well, I'll wait to put in quintuple. To do it exact, you put an F of X, right? You still use the parentheses, so that matches. You put in the colon, press return, and then it's X times 5. But you don't just do that, you return X times 5, okay? So now if I run this, let's see, is that correct? I didn't get any errors. Easy to get an error in this one. And to call it is actually the same. So if you put an F of 3, look at that, you get the 15. But this is not clean code. This is like, it's how we do it in math to make things more kind of simple and clean. But, you know, like right here, you don't know what that means. So typically in coding, you would write something like quintuple. And what are you going to quintuple? X, sure, but let's call it a number. You can call these variables anything. And then you're going to return the number times 5. And so instead of calling F of 3, you can see I say quintuple 3. And the cool thing about that is that's what it does, is quintuple 3. Now, I'll show you a common error. I change this and then I try to run this. It says error, name quintuple is not defined. I'm like, well, I just defined it. But I didn't run the cell. Okay, you got to run the cells. And what that means is the cell has been run, but not since I changed it. So I've never defined it. You can write it up there, but if you don't run it, then it has not been stored, right? You can, I might change it, but you have to run it for it to store. So I press Shift Enter, I run it. Now quintuple has been stored. So now if I press Shift Enter, I spell it correctly, it does in fact work. Try one more time, quintuple. Look at that. I just love this. You write your own function and now it's stored in your Python experience, right? It's saying, hey, is this what you're looking for? And you're like, yes. So when you see that, you can press Enter, it's highlighted, and it gives you your function. It's kind of funny in quintuple something. Do you know what 5 times 17 is? It's like, well, it's like one of those edge cases, right? Hopefully most of you do. It is 85. So you can really do a lot with functions in Python. Like, I just want to do one more. How about this one? Write function to determine area of a triangle. Ooh, fun. All right, so how do we do this? Well, you need the DEF, okay, space, and then type in area, and then underscores are standard, right? Area of what? So triangle, this is clear, okay, area of triangle. And then the inputs, what should the inputs be? Well, you need two, right? A base and a height. So the way you get two values is you do commas. So you can have more than one in Python. In math too, you just don't see it that often. Base, comma, height. You see it depending on the class. You see more in higher division classes. Okay. So and I press the colon. So again, it's just a function. The only difference is now I've got two inputs. And I want to show you one other thing. I could like make a variable and say, okay, let me define what the area is first. Area equals, well, it's 1/2, which is actually 0.5, but you could write 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 times base times height. And my point here is that you could have like 100 lines if you want, but the variant, then you just return what it is that you've defined, which in this case is the area. Okay. So try that. Press Shift Enter. Note that your geometry homework just got really easy. And I always recommend in math functions doing one that you can in fact check so you know if it's right. Like, I don't know, maybe 4 and 6. So I can do it in my head. Base of 4, height of 6. 4 times 6 is 24. Half of that is 12. So it should give me a 12. Press Shift Enter. And I get 12.0, which is the correct value. Okay? So those are the main topics I want to cover just in kind of an overview of Python, well, coding Python really in Colab. There's a lot more. I'll just show you one last Colab thing. When you finish notebooks, you could change things and forget to run things and it could not work. So it's a good idea to do runtime, restart and run all. What that does is it allows your code to run top to bottom. So I'm going to do that. Press yes. And it just resets everything and runs it top to bottom. And hopefully it goes through and you don't get any errors. If you do get an error, you can always go back up and look at it and see if you can figure it out. Of course, you can use this notebook as a guideline. And if you want to test yourself to see, did you kind of get the gist of this lesson at the end here, you could, let me give you a little challenge you can do on your own. Challenge, really, you could pick anything. Can you say, write function that gives perimeter of a rectangle, right? And you could even ask yourself, what about perimeter and area? Okay, so that is a start. So this lesson is set up for my students who will be continuing with an introduction to contemporary data analytics. I encourage everyone to participate in that class. It's going to be really exciting. So in the next videos that this one has been designed for, hopefully it's linked otherwise, you will actually learn, there's going to be a big jump if you already know Python, because you're going to learn how to access big data in Python and how to do stuff with it. So it should be a lot of fun. Thanks.